Hey guys, what we're going to be learning today is how to create isometric buildings. So isometric, if you're not familiar with the term, is just a three-dimensional kind of effect that has no convergence to a vanishing point. It doesn't have a real kind of perspective. It's more like a blueprint or a plan view. I'm going to be constructing an Old West building, and I have some inspirational reference on my other screen. This is by Adrian Chan from ArtStation, just one of many that I have. And so if we want to construct a building like this, there are a lot of interesting features and angles that might pose a challenge to just draw purely by instinct, or even if you know the rules of perspective. And so I'm going to show you an easier way, especially if you're more unfamiliar with perspective rules, on how to construct something like this with maybe curved toppers like this and different heights of different features. Okay? So I'm going to put that on my other screen so I can take a look at it. And what I have here in Krita is a simple isometric grid that I constructed, and I have it all inside of a folder so that I can turn it on and off. Each part of this, if I pop these off, right, this is the ground plane, just a grid of 1 by 1 squares stretching back, 7 deep and 7 wide. I have the back of this cube, so if you were to go 7 straight up, then this is where you would end up. And then what really helped me construct that are all of these lines, these green, red, and blue lines. These all represent the different directions. So the green represents vertical direction. You can see they're evenly spaced. The red represents the, let's say, left and right direction. And the blue would be the forward and backward direction. So superimposed on top of each other, you can see that if I get my drawing tool here, if I start here and I go 1 space in this direction and then 1 space back in this direction, right, I'm going around a square on the ground. And then if I want to turn the green on, if I go 1 space in this direction here and hit the next grid square, that's not exactly square to just go this far, but it's an equal enough increment that it will help us. You can kind of see it makes like a squished box. But now we've gone around a corner and then up into the air by 1 unit. So if I come back this way, I'm still up in the air. If I come back this way, I'm still up in the air. And if I go down, then I'm back where I started. And there's sort of a 3-dimensional effect that is created there. The reason why we do isometric versus a typical perspective is because it's a little bit more precise as far as measurement is concerned. But as you can kind of see from this demonstration of me walking around in 3 dimensions, it's not very convincing, and it can be disorienting as well. So you want to try to keep your head about you when you're working in an isometric view and just kind of treat it like a plan view rather than a beautiful finished drawing. If you want to have concept as nice as Adrian's there, then you need to learn the rules of perspective well enough to kind of just sketch in perspective. But this is a great place to start. So what we're going to do is we're going to make the facade of a building. So you see some of the fronts of these buildings, for instance, like this down here, has a square top with a little overhang, an additional square, and then a sort of half circle in the top. We're going to draw that flat on a grid, and then we're going to fit it into our perspective grid, our isometric perspective grid. And then we're going to make it look more 3-dimensional. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the isometric grid, and I'm going to enable just my program's standard grid. Show guides. No, I want the grid. There's the grid. Okay, I'll turn off my guides. Okay, so this one's just a standard flat grid. The only thing I have to keep in mind is that on my isometric grid, if I turn the ground plane back on, how many squares do I have to play with? I have 7 wide, 7 deep, and really as many as you want tall, but we'll just try to stay underneath 7 because that will keep us in the appropriate area. So I'm going to try to draw that facade over here, but I'm going to try to stay under 7 squares if I can. I have a straight line tool here, which will just enable me to click and drag from point to point. So we'll say if I start here, and then holding shift allows it to snap, go 1, 2, 3, 4 wide, for instance, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's go 6 tall. So we'll have a skinny facade. I'll go straight across, like that. Looks like this tool actually has some thickness I didn't realize. this is like more technical pen. So something like that. And then there's a little extra bit. So and it doesn't really matter. You don't have to stick to the grid for every detail. But I'm trying to go halfway between these two for at least where it steps in from the side. And here's an extra little lip. So now I want to erase out the parts that I don't need. Right here. Oh, I've still got the line tool. Well, that's okay. Erase out the parts I don't need. Now I'm going to use the circle tool, and I will draw a sort of half exposed little bit of round at the top here. You can see that this, if it were a perfect circle, the center would be way down here, but it's just a little bit of rounded top. So I'm going to start clicking right here in the center, but before I move, I'm going to hold down Control so I can draw from the center, make it nice and flat, and then before I let go of my mouse, I'm going to hold Alt and just slide down to get something like that. There are similar tools and abilities in every drawing tool, or every drawing program. You just want to know what yours are. So if it were Photoshop, then there's a different way to do this slightly, but all of the essentials are the same, that you can draw a circle and then move it into position like this. So there we go. I'm also going to take away a little thickness from these lines because of the tool I used to draw with. Made them a little bit overwhelming. But this doesn't have to be 100% precise. Just try to get it as close to the grid as you can so that this will act as appropriate guidelines. So there's the front of the building. One extra little thing I could do while I'm here, and it would probably be helpful, is to describe the thickness of this overhang, maybe the thickness of these pillars, and how far it goes off the side. Because if I don't do it now, it's going to be harder to determine once I'm drawing in perspective. So here, I'm just going to draw a little bit over the edge and down, down, and then all the way over here. And I'm going to try to get the same amount, go up, about to there, and in as well. Let me see if that lines up. That's a little too high. So just slightly down from there. There we go, something like that. And so that will be helpful. You can erase out this, but I may not want to erase the rest of that line. I might want to draw it right on here. What you'll see is that in perspective, we could copy that line as well. We don't really need to get this taken care of right at this moment. Because every line that we create in an isometric grid, you can just copy paste somewhere else. You don't need to have them preserved perfectly in this grid layout forever. Very quickly we can move into the isometric grid. And as long as you're drawing your angles at the right your lines at the right angle, then it's basically fine. So let's start with that then. This is a good one to put onto our grid. If you're at all worried that you're going to mess up your original, just duplicate your layer and turn one of them off. So now I've got this one to fall back on in case I mess it up. With the transform tool in Krita, I'm going to hold down Shift so that I don't change the proportions of what I drew. Move this down, and I'm going to line up one of the two corners to the grid. So I'm going to line up the left corner to the grid right there. Okay, and then I can size this to see. Oh, and if I put my center of pivot down there, so let me put it back on the grid. This is the center of pivot, which Photoshop has as well. I'm going to put it right there. Now when I hold Shift, no, didn't quite. Oh, it's Alt in this program. So I can tell how tall this is. So here's 1 unit tall, 2, 3, 4, and it was 4 wide when I drew it. So we'll go 5, 6, and I think that this was where I originally drew it to. So we'll just drop it there. It's okay if this goes a little bit higher. Krita allows me to skew, right? You can see that it's going off the grid and it's in fact stretching, but that's okay. I just want it to get it at the right angle, which means lining it up with those red lines there. So you can see the bottom line of the building is now lining up with the red lines, which means this whole thing is like a three-dimensional card that's laying on this plane now. Okay? Krita also allows, once you've done that, to slide perfectly along that new axis, which is very, very helpful. So I can keep this 4 wide if I want, like this. You can see it's slightly off. Tip it down, there we go. So I can keep it 4 wide and I can put it anywhere on the grid. So I'm going to line it back up with this corner right here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Just trying to make sure it's perfect if I can. There we go, as close as it needs to be anyway. And now if I wanted to stretch the whole thing taller or shorter, I could. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Or I'm going 7 now. It actually looks slightly better at 7, I feel, so I'm going to leave it there. So now that's the front facade of my building. Okay. If I just wanted to make this a three-dimensional shape out of this, all I would have to do is duplicate and then move my new copy back along the grid, 1, 2, however many, let's just say 3 squares back, right? And then connect the back and front copies, and I would have this three-dimensional piece. So that's sort of what I'm going to do, but really this is just the trim of that building. The rest of the building is different. So if at this point, and we'll just leave it there, for example, I'm going to cut off the front half of it. There we go. So that we've only got the top and left sides showing. Then I can get my line tool and connect these dots. If I follow the grid, at least follow the grid lines, and connect the same point to the same point, you should be able to see that it's going to make a pretty convincing three-dimensional effect very, very quickly. Okay, so let's connect this to this. Some parts will cut off, so now we wouldn't be able to see what's in there. Like that. You can see all of these are parallel to the blue lines that I just created. So let me get rid of little bits that would get covered over, like those. I think, oh, and a little bit right here. And ultimately, these parts here will get covered over because I'm going to draw to there also. There we go. Okay. I think I swapped tools just then because I got a thicker line. Okay, so then we've got this like three-dimensional effect. Probably a little easier to see if I turn down the opacity of this guide layer a bit, and probably also at this point I could turn off the standard grid. Did you see there? Oh, looks like I forgot a line down at the bottom there. There we go. Okay, so you see this, you know, fully three-dimensional looking thing, and it's all of that which has been copied from the front. So half of the silhouette and lines that connect it, and there you go. This is not a beautiful drawing or a finished drawing, but it would make a great guide to draw more freely over the top. So if you want it to look more rustic, like an Old West building, for instance, these lines should probably be a little bit crooked, and there should be breaks in them where one plank begins and the other ends and stuff like that. And of course, nothing's going to be perfectly straight because we're talking about like rustic Old West construction. But this, if I combine this with the front like that, would make a really great guide to draw on top of. I just turn the opacity down as far as I want. I probably want to leave this guide showing so that I know which direction would be the standard direction, either side to side or front and back or up and down, whatever, and just draw over the top. Okay, so this would be a really easy way to work. So using that, you can get pretty far in the construction of just about anything. You can even add additional elements after the fact. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo. Let's go back to before I combined those. Okay, I'm just going to get rid of, no, I'm not going to get rid of the lines. I'll erase them. I'm going to squeeze this forward. So instead of being this big thick chunk, it's just going to be the silhouette of the front of the building. So I'm just sliding it forward on the grid, keeping this on that line, trying to make sure that all these extra lines that I drew connected like that. And so now that it's in place, I can grab my eraser tool and just get rid of the lines as they pass by. There we go. The point that they're supposed to hit. Shortening them all up like that. There we go. So that creates a nice front of this building. I don't know what happened to that bottom line. I think I drew it after the fact. Let's see. Oh, I need my straight line tool. There we go. So now that's reconnected. So here we've got like the front facade of the building again. But if we take a look at some of the roof lines on these concepts, right? Some of them are straight, some of them are bowed. Some of them are at an angle. This one's completely like an oblong shape with a little bit sticking off the edge. But over here we've got like these curving roofs, or maybe this slanted angled roof. And then we'd have to think, well, what do we do there? Well, if we keep following the guides, and I'm going to go ahead and combine these two layers and then make a new one. If we keep following the guidelines, I can walk myself up the building so many units, and I can walk myself back so many units, and really I just have to connect the dots. So I'm going to just click and drag from this front corner back 1, 2, 3 units. So 4 units, this makes it a square foundation for this building. Or I could stop somewhere else. I could stop at 3 if I wanted to. Let's make it 4 just to make it easy. Then I can walk up, let's say 1, 2, 3 right here, and we'll just stick right there. In this front corner, I could walk up 1, 2, 3. That means this would be a completely flat roof that you could walk on. We probably don't want that. That doesn't make a very good roof line. So what if we just go one more up, and now let's connect the line to the existing point. That creates an angle. So this would be a very shallow roof angle. Okay, we could go one more. Let's go up to here, and then connect that line. And this would make a slightly more pitched angle, right? And if we ended up going so high up here that we ended up following the red lines, that's a 45-degree angle. So you can see over here on the side of the building, if I connect this line, 1, 2, 3 over, 1, 2, 3 up. So that's a perfect square, at least in my grid system it is. And then that would be a 45-degree angle. Like I said, these are a little bit squished, so it's not 100% accurate, but it's close enough to make it look nice. So here we've got this nice roof angle of this 2 to 1 over 4 squares. So we can do exactly what we did before. I'm going to erase the parts I don't need, the front edges, and really I don't need this straight line either. And then I can copy that. Actually, I don't need the bottom line. I just need this much. Okay, so I can copy that and paste that, and then move it 1, 2, 3, 4 back, which would line up with my building. It's a little hard to see now because it's getting in the way, because an isometric grid, lots of things line up like that. But that is the back corner of my building. Oh, where did I draw that? I'm lost. Where did I draw? Oh, there we go. I had the right one in the very first try, and then I just doubted myself. Okay. So here's my back corner, right? Here's my front face over there. And if I start connecting these lines, this line here would connect across the front of the building. This line would connect across the back of the building. Okay? And so you can see certain parts of it will show, certain parts of it won't show. This would be more relevant if we had, let's say, a little thickness to our roof, like this. And then it had to stick out a little bit over here. So we'd probably want to know that, oh, we're going to see a little bit of shingle sticking out over the corner of the building over here. If I make it sort of like an angle, like this. Like that. Okay, so I'm going to erase away the parts that I don't need. So I don't need the front at all. It's going to be covered by the front of the building. I don't need anything back here because it's kind of covered up by the front facade. I need to see where it pokes out, right there. Okay. Like this. And then I can turn my original drawing back on again. You can see how it's creating this three-dimensional effect. Front edge, back of the roof. So I just combine all of that together and then maybe clean up a little bit, like this little bit that we don't need. That we probably do. This makes less sense now that I'm looking at it because it's kind of at an angle. It probably would stop here instead. So let's do that. It would stop here and wouldn't go all the way up through the facade, which probably means we wouldn't see this over here. I would have to extend some angles again to see if that was visible, but I think you get the picture of how this might work. Just one more example because this can get very, very specific if you want it to. I'm going to turn the opacity of this drawing down. If we wanted a curved roof line, We just need to know where to start from, where to end, and draw our line basically however we want, and then copy it. So I'm going to zoom in here, and I'm going to freehand a roof line starting from this same point here, ending at this same point here, but just creating a curve instead. So if I just, let's see, it's a very strange pen. I usually don't use the technical pens. I use the more blendy ones. So the pressure is a little odd for me. That's close enough. We'll just say that's fine. And I will transform it to, what should I do? Shorten it a little bit, squish it down. I just want it to hit, there we go, hit that red corner right there. Okay. So I'll erase away what I don't need. So right where it hits the corner, and over here as well, I want it to hit that corner perfectly. So this could be my curving roof line now. So if I copy that layer, let's duplicate that layer, and then move it, I'm going to line it up to the same grid point right over there. Okay. We could connect this, and this would create a curving roof also, just like our straight one. Most of it, unfortunately, is covered up by this large, sign in front. But you could do any kind of details that you want like that, really. For another example, just a more visible example, I'll create like a doorway or a hallway that extends off the front here with kind of a peaked roof as well. So first, we'll draw this much. So here's the door, like that. Bottom of it, and then right in between the two. So here's like the halfway mark. I'm just giving myself a guideline to hit. Now I'll use my brush tool, zoom in, get my angle right, and I'm going to draw a curved line to there, and a curved line to there, and get rid of those guides. So now this could also create a nice three-dimensional shape. So I'm going to select that whole thing, copy and paste, move it on the grid, however many steps forward I want it to be. Let's go 2 steps forward. It's almost like a chapel entrance now. And then use our straight line tool to connect, let's go with that one, to connect all of the identical points. So those are identical. These ones are, especially on the front. I mean, you don't need to connect the back unless this is made of glass. But if it were made of glass, then draw straight through. So like those ones are all connected. And I need to remember what's on what layer. Okay, so this one's got my original. I'm going to erase out the rear portions of that. Like this. Okay. And then combine the 2 layers. So here's a new 3-dimensional bit sticking off the side of this building. So hopefully that sheds some light on how you can construct things for an isometric 3D angle. What I recommend is get your basic structure in place as far as the depth, height, any particularly large details. But if you see all of this smaller stuff, those are the things that you should probably freehand. So banners and decorations on windows and planks on the front and stuff like that. But if you ever struggle with any part of this, you could always draw it in a flat perspective and then move it with a transform tool onto the grid to try to fit it into this grid system. Okay? So hopefully that's helpful. I'm going to use this as the basis of a full concept example where we construct the basic housing, then I freehand draw over the top of it to make it look a little bit nicer, and then finally quickly paint it for concept.